My name is Heiner Benking. This video is a first take of a series of productions I will do to document PowerPoint presentations I did over the years. And the first take is about a session of the International Scientific and Medical Network for an international conference towards a new renaissance, harmonizing spirituality, nature and health. This is a very high-level meeting of scientific, medical, spiritual, whatever people. So it is a very broad approach I'm presenting here, but I'm trying to do this as an exercise to use modern ways to present PowerPoints and also old lecture takes which were recorded in this case 5 years ago. So it was an article and presentation called Embodying, Harmonizing and Sharing Old and New Spaces and Times. I was just introduced, so I will open the floor to my presentation and try to follow with some slides as they have been presented, but I had much more in store, so you are welcome with the addresses below on the right to follow the original take and my PowerPoints in SlideShare.
Thank you. I had to change, not only because it was so exciting what I heard here, but the key author was David McBride, with whom we did for all the world religions a talk on oikos, ekumene, ekudomi, recently in Crete some years ago, and it was more focused on ontologies and epistemologies and abstraction, empathy. But as he cannot come, I have to do what I can. So thank you very much. I am waiting for the signal. Can you signal for me? Thank you very much. You see, I was so enthused because not only harmony, but Renaissance is so important for me. So I read about 10 bibliographies of Michelangelo, because he was deep into embodiment and he was sculpturing in the positive and in the negative sense and later building large buildings. But going deeper, I want to talk now about perspectives, multi-perspectives and positionalities and eccentric positionalities. The philosopher Hans Jonas said, we can, as humans, step out and look from above. And that is a trick. The Sufis say, if you want to solve a problem, take your own viewpoint out. So I will try to talk about mental mobility and embodiment. Because we have a problem here, they call it cyberculture. It is a new media, it is many things where I feel they have shown through creating the arts, by making that real, that this is important. So I was enthused by being invited by Franz Theo Gottwald, because harmonization out of the old tradition of the Chinese, I had two elders being Chinese, it's not yin-yang. And so there we worked in harmonization projects of UN, G7, OECD in the 80s, until they closed the whole thing as we had overstepped our mandate shortly before Rio. And our work from an educator, Werner Kollernbos, much is known, unfortunately in different heads. So it's again the issue, how can we bring different viewpoints, different Krishnamurti, and I had to translate it. The word, the symbol, the picture, the idea are not the truth, he says. But we pray to the picture. We worship, admire, adore, idealize the symbol and the icon. We credit the word with much significance. And he says all this is destructive, because then the word, the symbol, the image is becoming more important than everything else. So we have to be aware, and they say the same. I've been adding that here to the map and models. Also the maps, the models are not the territory. They are artificial constructions we create, and then we take them on as dogma, and then our karma is running over us. So I wanted to say that Marilyn is doing the dances of enlightenment. She is not stuck just with explaining words, but saying the commons, that is the first step. And then we have to see that we have to expand the commons, because now we are not just living on our island, in our little valley and the mountains around us. It is a little bit more complicated. And so I work with this ivory tower of the International Council of Scientific Unions. What is, as I'm a surveyor, I'm a geophysics person, what is, if maps and models could be super science and superstructures? Like the Chinese writing, you have a language in a frame of references where concepts, symbols, positions are very important, and not just the sequence of the letters. I have to jump because our time is short. So this is what I did with Professor Heinrich some years ago when we had to step to the new millennium. There is a crisis of order, of orientation, of meaning, and I took the metaphors which are really holding us. So in the Grimm fairy tales, the sweet pie, others speak the new media, cyberculture, internet, that's a bomb. So we have to really see what is the challenge now imposed by technological drive, which is happening much faster than we imagined. So in the design of the internet, they speak about a magnetic portal. Everybody now making his own internet site, and there's more and more segregation, more and more separation, and more exclusion. And we're not aware of that, and especially as it is in different languages. You search with Google, and you search in the wrong language, you will never find something. So the connections are not made, and that is a real tragedy. In doing all this research around global change with Willy Brandt in the 80s or whatever, all our science is trying to make oversimplified concepts, and then they're doing overclaims. So even the new 21st century studies on science and engineering put things into boxes. This is macro scale, this is planetary scale, this is natural sciences, this is life sciences, and that is spirituality. And we have to overcome and at least question the models and metaphor behind. Because the deep saying about metaphors is, a metaphor is an image schema, but watch your metaphors. Because you think you know, but don't, and that was Mark Twain. Then you run into trouble. So the trouble is that we think we know, and I have created, which might be of interest to some of you, with the International Society of System Sciences, a wholeness and healing seminar with the Santa Fe people on consciousness and science and complexity. And there, in this wholeness seminar, I discuss all these matters, only to open you the door that we discussed even 12 years ago with UNESCO and Club of Budapest, as we had the we question, who is we? There I presented the me, you, we, they, and other models, and how they can dance with each other. Because if you just put it into a box and then you label it, then you fall into the trap. This was presented for Rio. half a year in Geneva shows the intersectorial strategic dilemma of civility and negotiations. It was not brought to the table because, especially politics, wanted simple, they want polytainment, and want to stay in control. So my work, as I explained before, is on dialogue and decision cultures, and my fields are not just here staying in touch with the whole, but creating transformal community, informating, educating, engaging in social inventions or whistleblowing. And these wheels of transformation, you were speaking about the mandala, we can order, and if we order things, then it's an artificial construct, we can negotiate it. It is not the reality, but something on the table. So all traditions not just have a torus or a spiral or whatever image to explain complex issues. And so I worked with Barbara Marx Hubbard and other people on showing how these things could connect. I believe, like the Enneagram, it is important to not just show the opposites, but how the flow of energy is between the states. So, and then I have to come back, because this Paul Weiss here, he studied medicine. He was a father for Bertalanffy and his people studying general system sciences. He showed actually what the problems we had here was about genes. That there is a level of change from the gene to the tissue, to the organism, to the environment, and all this is neglected because our science wants to have it in a pigeonhole, labeled, and one point after the other. So we have been taking out for the Konrad Lorenz Institute such displays to show there is also an issue across scales. And that's another important graph for me. It was done by the Mellows. It shows that the upper right corner, there is what the Club of Rome report Limits to Growth is about. It is our children's and future generations' lifetimes, and it's the world. But the study where the interest of the people is in the lower quadrant, which means today and next week and just me and the family. And if we don't widen up the picture, we have Babylon. We fight over words and over turfs. I want to show, because we had this discussion here about Humboldt University 200 years, 3 weeks ago, that Herbert Stachowiak started the general model theory, not the general system theory. And that's very important, because in model, if you build it, like I was with designers and architects, building a house, building a model of a town, then you can negotiate it. So he came from general model theory and then started pragmatics, and including ethics and pragmatics and aesthetics. And he's unique, as he just died 5 years ago, but everything is in the National Library now. So all his writing to Piaget, to Feyerabend, all this, but it's in the box of German speaking. So it's horrible, even if it's 5 volumes, and bringing model thinking to education, and all these books is written, they couldn't label him in universities because they say he's a linguist, he's a cybernetics guy, he is a model man, he's an educator. It doesn't fit our academic schemas. So we do all what I'm explaining in a moment in an international encyclopedia of systems and cybernetics to explain what this word means and how they are used by the different faculties, disciplines, subject areas. Oh, this is double? That is great. What I wanted to show through the old traditions of anthroposophy and theosophy, they always say the truth is in the integration of all the isms. So if you just do materialism, or just do spiritualism, or just do idealism, you're on the wooden way. So this I mentioned also too. So my work is now the last 20 years trying to integrate such systems, sciences, worlds, metaphors. And we found with Charles Sander Peirce, who was also a surveyor, that you say there are different sign systems, symbol, icon, and index. And all these semiotics guys find what is an index. But an index is a pointer. And it's a pointer in a frame of reference. And if you use this, then you can say a map the child is writing is an orientation schema to negotiate and even dig into it, go deeper, so you can pan and zoom in such artificial constructs. And some people might have heard about the Marburg library. He was in Hamburg and then he went to London. He used the same concept like purse, index, symbol, icon, or from Cusanos, analogon, symbol, icon, to really show, and he made a whole library, a whole exhibition place in Hamburg, where each level of this large house was dedicated to words, to images, to orientation, and to action. Then this is then connected, I say here, down there, ethics and pragmatics connected to Stachowia, but also Hans Jonas. Because Hans Jonas said, ethics in the future, or responsibility in the future, has to be solved with space and time horizon. And I just want to show you, this is an artificial construction, but we have to go beyond just using words. And here with the Academy of Sciences, we are now working on integrating the maps and the models and the visual models and the linguistic interpretation. And this is just a prelude on actually what I do. So I would have loved to have you here 2 weeks ago. It was in the Deutsche Bank Guggenheim on abstraction and empathy. They just closed it back to New York. It's really horrible because these deep artists like Malevich, they went to abstraction, but then again to embodiment. And that is actually the dance I want to do with you. And I want to warn you, I step back. I look from a high stand. You see it on the left side, otherwise you're in the box. And in the knowledge organization, we speak about detailed knowledge, group knowledge, and survey knowledge, overview knowledge. And what I'm doing now, I'm just speaking about the big picture survey, overview knowledge. So this is not an answer to everything, but it's an orientation schema to help us at least find it and then translate it. And that actually was this metadatabase UN harmonization projects. I was the expert 5 years for this UN harmonization efforts, where all the chieftains wanted to maintain their old data. They did not understand that we are just building bridges we don't want to earn or own. So we try to create a map for the reality, but also for imaginary things. And you have seen it here. Jean Goethe said it has to be concrete, even when it is an eccentric conditionality, and you step out of the direct, tangible world. And in the Enlightenment pedagogy, they already started to think things together. Like Leibniz said, I can imagine 3 other rooms where all this knowledge is, and conceptually orient and negotiate. All this is forgotten. All our science schemas are again into artificial classification repository systems where it is in hierarchies. But these hierarchies, like trees, don't work when you have culture, different discipline, different environments. Oh, I have to. Yes, I have to show you that we, with young people, work now with UNESCO on this decade for sustainability education, and everybody agrees we need a paradigm shift. But what is a paradigm? It's a way of thinking. And so we look with these young people on the challenges, Gestaltungskompetences, how to really create knowledge and a spirit of openness in the world and integrating. So this is very, very large schemas where I focus very much on the two, but also on the others, because you have to really reflect and negotiate the differences. And I work since 20 years. I learned a professor who did out-of-the-box thinking and paradigm mapping workshops with foreign students in America, coming to America and maintaining themselves. So he worked on relating what is the paradigm, what is the thinking, and there is Mr. Wilbur, and there is another guy, and we negotiating quadrants. And any schema is great, but you have to make it concrete and change it. Maybe even throw it away, no problem. So I have to, this is my central thing. We have to make words solid, and I think Marilyn will agree, words alone are not enough. And we discussed also that we have to form other expressions we are coming to next in a moment, because there are other ways of cultural expressions like music, aromas, light. So smells, the Arabs have been designing cool towns where each level had a different smell. So you knew where you had to be there. And I don't want to go into Goethe, that is David's field. But we have to really come to a common ground. And this common ground the children call World House or House of Ice. And I have been building this house with young people, with an artist from San Francisco speaking about the real space and the imaginary virtual space, and building it as a physical construct, as a model, because we had to show in the White House conference with the German Chancellery what is global change. Nobody was willing to accept that it is cross-disciplinary or transdisciplinary, and so we worked with young people on mapping issues in a pattern language, so it's not just in one domain or in a field language, so it's possible to overshow how it is connected. We discussed here a lot about footprints. With the UNESCO early this year in Bonn, we discussed with the Indians handprints and mindprints. The handprint is the reduction, and the mindprint, the idea to go to another system, to another paradigm, to another solution. So to really bridge cosmologies and all this, you see, I'm really trying to present realities. And this was actually my presentation after the Club of Budapest in 1996 in Budapest, when I was a medical and scientific network, when I spoke about extensions, physical extensions, mental and social extensions. And these are the eyes. The children call it a house of eyes, to really think together, me, we, you, they, and other viewpoints. And we called it there in Treaty with ecological theology and environmental ethics, oikos, ekumene, ekudomi. Oikos, the Greek word for house, but also the place for the fire. Ekumene, everybody knows. But all our society went into economy and not into ekudomi. And this ekudomi is the careful housekeeping of typically the wives.
And the house is the cosmos.
Yes. And there you see we tried to bring this all together with UN and ECOSOC to not fight over words and check meanings. And with the Tagore-Einstein East-West thinking and not North-South thinking only. And really negotiate, as I just mentioned, with this Club of Rome people. What is the meaning? How is it connected? How it is contextualized? And I have all these books here because these are very, very dear to me. And if you are interested, I have much more with me, and I'm very happy to have your attention. Thank you very much. Oh, you should have fastened seatbelts. I know, you shouldn't say more than that. But it's all in the web, all is available.
I would just like to make a comment. Okay. It's spectacular overview. Thank you. That's all. I don't have any questions. Just observation.
I've got many questions.
I mean, I do, but I certainly can't begin posing them. But thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
A question to you and everybody. Are we thinking or are we dancing?
I would like to dance.
This is a metaphor which encompasses everything.
A thought that comes to my mind listening to you is just, I want to share in Chinese. There is a philosophical system to look at the world called feng shui. It is in a very abridged and corrupted way has come to the western part of the world as well. And it has nothing to do with some stars and frogs and all the things. And there is a method of training the people who are applying the feng shui system to their customers. You have to come into the state of the early heaven. The early heaven is the state of pure chaos. And they learn about 30,000 laws to be obeyed while observing landscape, houses and so on. And they are all contradictory. So the trick is to overload the thinking brain and giving chance for inspiration.
Or trance, whatever you want to call it.
So I felt a little bit in the state of the early heaven. I was very much inspired by all of the inspiration that came through while my brain was just heavily engaged with following every thread, which was impossible. But I understand what you wanted to say.
I can only say that I learned about Feng Shui in the mid-70s. The guy who was building the Philharmonie here in Berlin was Shalom, was my professional father then since 1999. And his work was on rhythmical measurement schemes in world building culture. He left Shalom in Berlin to go to the UN to be a state planner all over the world. So he looked into the structures of the Inca, Egypt, he was in Iran, he was in Taiwan, and he looked into how they were building. And the Chinese have a yin-yang system overlapping, the male-female. So this is how I learned. I didn't learn much in university, more in kindergarten. To really think out of the box of this dualities and right-wrong schemas. We have done it all with Laszlo in the Club of Budapest. There we had all these discussions about dualities, but we always go back to words only. And if Marilyn is making the children reinvent it and live it and immerse them into another culture, then you can take it in and up for your own, re-imprint it, translate, transcend, transform. I think these are the important issues, and it has to do with pragmatics, with action and ethics.
I like very much the embodiment. It's important for me, and I think also your concept of new time, new space. I think it is very necessary that we have spaces where we can really embodiment this new thinking, and perfect will be when we can go every day in these new spaces.
The a priori of Kant, of space, not allowing fullness and emptiness like the Eastern traditions, is a very dramatic dilemma for our European or Western culture, because it makes us rigid, and actually we should be fluid, and then we can create extra spaces. And we have imagination space, we have mental locomotion as the most natural and cheapest form of healing. So imagination is killed by putting it into symbols or signs.
imagination is killed by putting it into symbols.
Yes, by just, as I showed this, if you just think in words, or just think in images, or just think in metaphors, and not allowed to be the same, then you are dogmatic. And the words alone are in the way. My mother always told me, don't do what I say, do what I mean. So the meaning is much more folded and wide than just, I gave you the right direction. This is the definition. If you look in the Wahrheit, a very good German dictionary, then you find 460 uses of the word I. So tell me how a computer should translate when I say I.
But symbols and images, in my mind, are reminders of principles that we use as we can, and in an imaginative way, each in our own way. But they symbolize a principle that we must not forget. And that's why the loss of symbolic knowledge, in my opinion, is no minor deprivation, because these reminders of principles that we should live by are not there anymore. So the images and the symbols and the words all interact to develop, in my opinion, a wider imagination of how to live.
Well, I'm fully with you. I wouldn't go without images, I wouldn't go without symbols.
Yes.
We need them all, and we need to subsume and resonate, and in each of them is a mirror of the deeper oneness.
Here, here. Now, I couldn't agree more, and you expressed it in a bronze plaque way.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, in that case, let's expect.
This video is a test. Life is a test. And I was just trying to record it as a first try for the records to really make sure what has been done 5 years ago or in other takes 10 or 20 years ago with some PowerPoints or other presentations. For people who look at it now 5 years later, it needs to be made very clear what the scientific and medical network is like, what this new renaissance and bridging schemas and signs and symbols worlds and cosmologies means. And as in many of the words Marilyn Wilhelm was presented, this is definitely not clear to the onlooker 5 years later. Marilyn Wilhelm was the first presenter at this conference towards a new Renaissance 3. She founded the Wilhelm School, and I was with her a creative member of the Club of Budapest maybe 15 or 20 years ago. So all this is part of the records. I realize that I had to jump by not only jumping my title after this fabulous congress, but also jump between slides I had available. Now, 5 years later, we have the videotake, we have the slide share, we have all this multitasking, multi-window, multi-perspective, multi-positional possibilities of cross media to make something sensible and meaningful with new media and not getting lost in rubbish and noise, speaking about big data when it is actually big noise. All this is zooming back into present time 2014. I invite you to go to the introductory series of this cognitive panorama and spoons and feathers, sharing, caring, daring principles I'm advocating. And I hope you bear with me, and I hope the whole take was not too long. Good night and good luck.